We will go to May. And the Hazara have been persecuted for decades, if not centuries. And of course, right now, some experts say that, of course, we see the serious risk of genocidal atrocities against the Hazara in Afghanistan, and now that the Taliban took over. Could you just tell us a little bit more about the serious risk faced by the Hazara in Afghanistan?
Yeah. Thank you very much. I think when we talk about the Hazaras, it's very important to give a little bit of historical context into the persecution of Hazaras. For those who don't know, the Hazaras are an ethnic group based, native to the country we call Afghanistan today, who have been persecuted for centuries. But the intensity of persecution of Hazaras really started in the 1800s, the dawn of the 19th century. And so between 1891 to 1893, the king of Afghanistan, Emir Abdurrahman Khan, massacred 2/3 of the entire Hazara population. They enslaved the rest of the popular community. There were thousands of Hazara women and children were sold as slaves. In 19th October 1893, Times London reported that 10,000 Hazaras were sold in the bazaar of Calcutta, India. So at that time, with the population of Afghanistan being about 5 million, that is around 0.2% of the population. So we can see the intensity or the length of the persecution the Hazaras have faced historically. But when we talk about the persecution of Hazaras, there's 3 reasons as to why Hazaras are being persecuted. There's the historical context in which I just explained. There's the religion aspect of it as well. The Hazaras follow Shia sect of Islam, unlike the majority of Afghanistan's population. But of course, we also have Sunni Hazaras, Ismaili Hazaras, Christian Hazaras, as well as secular Hazaras. So it's a very diverse group of people. In the 1890s, again, this links back to history. The king of Afghanistan declared the jihad against the Hazaras. And this was the focal point that led to the huge massacre of the Hazaras in Afghanistan. And ever since, the persecution continued in Afghanistan, but of course it was a different level, different intensity. But the Hazaras faced another dark history when the Taliban came to power in the 1990s. And at that time, they launched this campaign of, in their words, to clean Afghanistan of the Hazaras. They had this quote that used to go, Tajiks to Tajikistan, Uzbeks to Uzbekistan, and Hazaras to Goristan. And Goristan means graveyards. And they gave the Hazaras 2 options, to either convert to Islam, Sunni Islam, or they would die. And so this intense campaign, this genocidal campaign that once again that was launched against the Hazaras. One of the massacres that we often talk about is the August 1998 in Mazar-e-Sharif. Reportedly around 10,000 Hazaras were massacred within the span of just 3 days. The families and the neighbors were not allowed to bury the bodies of the victims, which they were just left out on the street to be eaten by wild dogs. And the other reason in which the Hazaras are getting persecuted is because of the values that we hold. The Hazaras are very liberal, and they're very educated, which is very different to the teaching of the majority of the Afghan population. In the past 20 years that the international community was present in Afghanistan, Hazaras were the biggest allies and supporters of democracy and the international presence in the country. There wasn't a single shot fired from the Hazara-populated districts against the international community. And because of this, the Taliban sees us as the enemy of Islam, as the enemy of the country. Since the takeover of Afghanistan by the Taliban, we have seen a significant increase in the targeted attacks against the community. Lord Pickle talked about early signs of genocides, and this is something that the situation of Hazara resonates very much with what happened during the rise of Nazi regime in Germany, because the hate literature, the early signs, started back in the 1890s, and they have continued because it has been implemented into consciousness of the Afghans in the country, which means that this propaganda, misinformation, hate, prejudice have continued. And because there has never been intervention in Afghanistan, it has continued. And this is why we see no regret or guilt when the Taliban are targeting the Hazaras in Afghanistan. In the past couple of months, just in the western Kabul, in a district called Dashti Barchi, in the past 5 months, we have seen 10 attacks. So that's 1 in 14 possibility if you're in Kabul, in the western Kabul, that you'll face an attack. And unfortunately, these signs are very clear. By definition, these are genocidal acts that's being carried out against the Hazara community. And without any intervention, it will continue as it has continued in the past 130 years.
Thank you very much, May. And indeed, there have been no oversight and no monitoring of the situation. But ultimately, you are now involved with an inquiry, parliamentary inquiry into the situation of the Hazara, and the report will be most likely published tomorrow. So, of course, we look forward to see what are the findings of the report and what can be done in response to the atrocities.